Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about how I became semi-retired and how you might be able to do the same for yourself. So I have talked about being semi-retired in some shape or form, and over the years I have documented my financial journey. So I will be mentioning a few of the videos that are relevant to this topic as we go along. But this all started 2 years ago. Initially, my plan was to become fully retired, as in never have to work again. However, to do that, it would require me to continue to work full time for 5 more years. And I thought to myself, like, life is too short. I don't want to spend my youth working tirelessly when I don't have to. It makes more sense to have more of a work-life balance now while I'm young versus postponing my life yet again another 5 years. Because what I find is that my entire life has been a postponement in some way of certain things in order to get goals, which is valid, I suppose, that there is some sacrifice necessary. But at this point in my life, I just felt like taking the risk and becoming semi-retired versus just continuing to work to meet this very large financial goal. So fundamentally, how I became semi-retired was that I had to save enough money so that I felt comfortable not having to work full time. And basically that amount of money was enough to cover my basic cost of living. So basic cost of living for me was housing, of course, utilities, property taxes, groceries, things like that. And I talk more about that in my financial independent journey set of videos that I will link for you guys. In addition to what I mentioned before, the benefits of being semi-retired is one, I wasn't going to postpone my enjoyment anymore. And then additionally, it allowed me to take a break from working. So I wasn't working as much, which was a constant source of stress. But then I was able to still bring in enough income while having some time off from work. Additional benefits, because it was a steady state of income, like I had the ability to put away money for retirement, which means I could still continue to save for the future as well. And then of course, with any W-2 job, you have other benefits, such as the ability to have health insurance or pretty good health insurance in comparison to, say, getting it off the marketplace. I had good insurance that was available to me by working a 9 to 5. And then even though work in itself was a source of stress for me, there is some usefulness in leaving my house and interacting with people for a few days a week, just, for personal development purposes. Now, how exactly have I done this? If you look back on my videos, you can see all the financial moves I've made over the last year. I just saw my YouTube studio page that I've been on YouTube for 6 years, surprisingly. So during those 6 years, I've documented what I've been doing. But I think the most fundamental thing that I did was that 6 years ago, I paid off all my student loan debt. So at the time, I had over $200,000 worth of student loans after graduating grad school. So that was a culmination of undergraduate loans as well as grad school loans. And I've documented the entire journey on here, so feel free to watch that if you're interested. Once I did not have the burden of student loan payments and debt, and then I moved on to my financial independence journey, which I talked about previously, which is the fundamental thing in being able to comfortably step down from working full time. So the basis of that is that you need to have enough invested so that if you were to withdraw 4% of that investment over the years, you would have enough to cover your living expenses. So to accumulate enough wealth to do that, some of the things I did over those years was to max out my 401k/403b every year. Currently, I believe that is $23,500, but it was lower by a few $1,000s in the past. So every year it is adjusted for inflation, not every year, but every few years. So I think maybe when I started off, it was like $1,900, and then it's progressively increased to $23,500. And then another thing that I did was to max out my Roth IRA. Now currently that is set at $7,000 a year, and whatever the limit was over the past previous years, years, I met that every year. At the time, I did not have a HSA. Actually, I believe I did have a HSA for 1 year at a job that I solely worked at for a year. So I had that. Currently, I do have a HSA as well, but it was not factored into getting that initial amount for me to feel like I could semi-retire. So the ability to max out tax advantage accounts is, of course, a great way to get things going. But there are fundamental things that I have been talking about for years and that are sound financial tasks / things to consider if you're trying to accumulate a decent amount of wealth over time. And the first one of that is that I invested all of my money outside of my living expenses. That requires, of course, some sort of planning. So, of course, I had a budget. I'm very much into budgeting. I just enjoy seeing where my money goes and tracking expenses. So that was not a problem for me. So I budgeted the amount of money that I brought in every month. I set aside the amount that was required for living expenses, which I kept low. And then anything beyond that was invested. And I had a set amount invested every month that I did so like without fail, basically automatically every month throughout the years that I saved for semi-retirement. As I mentioned in my financial independence video, during this time I was making 6 figures. So of course that helps you to save faster. The more money you make, the more money you can save, provided you have discipline. However, it's not so much the amount of money that you make as in the amount you were able to save. So there is this concept of savings rate, which is of course the amount of money that you were able to save versus the amount that you were able to spend. And the higher your savings rate, the quicker you can get to financial independence or whatever goal you're thinking of. For instance, if you're able to save 50% of your income, regardless of what that income is, there you have basically set yourself up for 1 year of not having to work in theory. So that is how the concept works. Of course, say if your income is low, for instance, if you made $40,000 a year and you try to live off only $20,000 a year, that would be very difficult. I believe like living on less than $20,000 is like below the poverty limit. So that's where trying to increase your income comes in, because it's not always entirely feasible to save large amounts of your income if you don't have enough income to begin with. So in addition to having a low cost of living, a high savings rate, I also had no debt, which of course helped me to save more. And I managed to look back at, I think I made a spreadsheet at some point during the journey, and I looked back and found that I had a 63% savings rate of my gross income. So that was income before taxes. I managed to save 63% of it. And that included the things that I talked about previously. So the 401k, 403b, the Roth IRA, and then the excess money beyond that I put aside every month in investments in a brokerage account, that was included as well. And then additional savings that I had at the time for whatever goal I was saving towards. There are, of course, other things in my favor over the last few years, and that is that the stock market has been basically trending upwards and has returned higher than average returns. So I believe last year, as an example, I think the stock market the US stock market returned over 23%. So that is higher than, say, the average since the beginning of the stock market, which is about 78%. Now we'll get into how you can do something similar for yourself. So this is basically a reiteration of things that I have done and that just make the most financial sense, which is you need to be able to lower your expenses significantly. The biggest way to lower your expenses is, of course, to lower the largest expenses that you have, which is usually housing. So the way I was able to do that is because I did have some privilege to a certain degree, as in that my house did not have a mortgage, so I never had a mortgage payment, and of course I wasn't renting, so that made my housing costs very low. Similarly, and throughout my life, I have done other things to make my living expenses low. So for instance, in college, like having roommates. In grad school, I lived in a less than desirable neighborhood to avoid paying higher than needed rent at the time. So there are definitely things that you can do. So try to do what is in your means, and of course what is like safe. Once you're able to lower your expenses, you need to be able to save the rest. Now, I think the way to do this most stringently is to make it something that you cannot not do. So you have to make it so that it's done automatically. At least for me, that's the easiest way to do it. So once you've discovered or went through your expenses, your income, and you know how much you need to survive every month, then have that money alone be available to you to spend, and then the rest of the money is automatically invested or saved, or whatever way you want to do this. Preferably, if you're doing this over years and you're not needing the money in the next 5 years, then it is ideally to be invested. However, if you have a low risk tolerance, you can put it in something stable like a money market fund, bonds, a certificate, something to the like. And then of course, if you have debt, it is best to pay it off because it acts as a sort of, or it's basically an expense that is eating into your ability to save. And additionally, it is costing you money because most debt has some sort of interest rate attached to it. So instead of paying other people, you need to be paying yourself by getting rid of the debt and then saving that amount of money that you would have put towards debt payment into an investment account, which then pays you interest / returns. And then of course, one of the key levers in saving money is to increase your income. Now for me, I increased my income basically by going to grad school. I had an undergraduate degree. I made decent money with my undergraduate degree. However, I was not making 6 figures. And I knew that I needed to make more money in order to just not have to work as hard as I had been working with an undergraduate degree. So I went back to graduate degree and was able to, I would say, double my income at this point. But at the time, it was not necessarily, in the beginning, it was not necessarily double. But over the years, it has more than doubled due to raises and cost of living increases, etc. But that is something to think about, of course. As I just mentioned, getting that graduate degree came with a lot of debt. So the only way I would recommend getting a graduate degree is if you know for sure that your income is going to allow you to pay off the debt. If not, it's probably not worth it, in my opinion. And then, as I've mentioned before in many other videos, before you start doing any investing, you need to have an emergency fund. So in the event that you need money quickly, you can pull out of the emergency fund versus dipping into your investments. Now, when you start investing, I have a whole video about how to invest, the order of investing, how to buy stocks, etc. But I think the best way to invest as a 9-to-5 worker is to basically use what is available to you at your employer, such as your 401k or 403b. If somehow you don't get that account, then you can always get a Roth. A Roth is available to anyone that has earned income up to a certain degree. Of course, there are a few nuances, but it's usually available to most people, so that's something to look into. And then if you are going to semi-retire, then I would also, in the process of you saving, think about a job that you can do that will allow you to have extra income while you're working less. So that could be in your current field by just simply dropping down to part-time like I did, or it could be something in another field, something that doesn't require much more work / investment, at least monetary investment at least. That's something to consider as well. Now, I of course understand the process will take years, specifically, or more importantly, if you make an average income, it will take you years to be able to save enough to semi-retire / cut your hours down. But I definitely think it can be done depending on how motivated you are, the skills you have, the resources you have, etc., etc. And I feel at this point in my life that it has been worth it to be able to do this. Currently, I found that my work-life balance has been much better. Like for instance, today I am not working and I have the luxury of making this YouTube video. And additionally, it has allowed me time to focus on hobbies such as, of course, content creation, all the other things that I like to do. Like I like to work out, I like to travel, I like to read. And now I have more time to do that. And then for my particular job, I also found that I have been less exhausted, as it is a very exhausting type of work that I do. And then the whole act of actually getting to work is in itself like another physical struggle, because unfortunately I cannot work from home, so there's that as well. So the less that I work, like the less physical exertion that I am putting on myself. And then for me, the best part is schedule flexibility, as I mentioned, work-life balance. Now, because I work so little, I'm able to like schedule my vacations for longer without having to use paid time off or as much paid time off. So it's been fabulous in that way. And I've been, you've probably seen vacationing a lot over the last few years, which is of course a result of like not having to be obligated to be at work as much. Now, some things that are a reality of being semi-retired is that of course you're gonna have less money, which is for me, or initially was quite jarring. Once you've been earning a certain amount of money for a certain period of time, like it's always like a shock to the system to see like less money in your bank account, even though of course you are working less. It's just not something that you're used to. So that is of course something to, you know, work on during the process, an emotional sort of task to work on. But of course, as long as you somehow are able to maintain your ties to your previous job, or you keep your skills up, you can always go back to work at any time. So that does provide some sort of solace, or it should anyway. So nothing in that regard is permanent. So for me, that did give me some peace of mind. And I have found that that time has come for me as I am looking to buy a larger property and furnish that property, among other things. So the time has come for me to come out of semi-retirement for a little while, and it's nice to be able to have that option to come and go as I choose. And I of course have enjoyed being semi-retired and cannot see myself working full-time for a very long time in the future at all. So that is going to be it for this video. Of course, if you have any questions about the entire process, I am happy to chat about it in the comments, so leave some below and I will see you next time.